Well, hello, how are you all today? Would you like to write a book? Chances are that's why you're watching this. Now, I know that a lot of people will be surprised when they saw maybe it's popped up in your YouTube feed about how to write a book, and you were surprised to see that this was a preparedness channel. And so I'm going to explain that to you. And a lot of people who normally watch me on the preparedness channel might find this interesting too. So I should tell you why I'm here and why I'm talking about how to write a book, because I've written books, successful books. And I tell you something, you have a book in you. You may not think that you do. A lot of people think they do, but they don't know how to go about it. So that's what I want to talk about. And it's a great way. I'm going to make a second one. I'm not sure if how soon I'll make it, but I'm going to do a second video about the life of a writer, because it is the best life you can imagine. It's the best job out there. I don't, and I wouldn't consider it a job, but I've heard or I read somewhere, and I don't remember which, that more people would rather be an author, rather write a successful book than be a professional athlete. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I can't swear by that, but I'll tell you what, being a writer, it doesn't surprise me a bit, and I can well understand that. So I'll make a second one about the life of a writer, and it's I'll tell you, it's an unbelievable life. Um, so who am I, and why am I telling you how to write a book? Well, I've written a number of books, so let me show you. My name is Steve Smith, Stephen C. Smith, if you read the covers of my books. My first book was The Reversion. My second book was The Revival. My third book was The Renewal. My fourth book is An Appeal to Heaven. My fifth book was, are we on five? Yeah, The Blessings of Freedom. My sixth book was Hostages to Fortune. And my seventh book was On Wings Like Eagles, and I am currently writing an eighth book. Those are the Stonemont series. They have been very successful. I kind of fell into it by mistake, which is why you should take have a good feeling about how you can. I'll tell you my story, how I stumbled into this and how it all went. But I'm writing an eighth book in the process. Matter of fact, I was just sitting down to start writing, and this occurred to me. I said, I don't make because I get a lot of people asking me, how can I write a book? It must be great to be a writer, and how can I do it? And I tell them, it's you have a book. Everybody has a book in them because everybody has a story in them, and people are interested in hearing stories, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. People are interested in other people. They're interested in the world for the most part. There are a few who aren't, but I feel sorry for them. But most people like a story, because a good story will both entertain and educate. So that's why when I sat down to start writing, I said, I'll do this one instead. And like I say, I'm writing the eighth book in the Stonemont series, but I'm also writing two other books that are very different in different genres. And I might publish one of those under a nom de plume so that nobody knows that it's me. Nom de plume, a fancy French word meaning pen name, right? Nom, name, plume, pen. They used to write with, goose feathers or whatever it was. Well, let me start off with why you should not be dissuaded from feeling that you can write a book. Okay, we'll start there, and then I'll come up with kind of how I began writing. But I want to give you a little bit of my background, so that because when you hear my background, you're not going to feel at all. Shall I say? How should I? As a writer, sometimes you search for words, right? But you're going to feel perfectly confident that you can. Okay, I graduated. Now, was I always a great English major and literary? Hardly, man. I was a bounce around. I was a hoodlum in high school. I graduated 623rd out of a graduating class of 625. There was only two people in that whole class dumber than me. Now, I wasn't unintelligent. I was smart, but I was dumb because, well, I didn't go to school. I didn't go to, and when I did go to class, I slept through it. And the only reason I think they let me graduate is because they didn't want me back. And the people who would be most surprised to find out that I became a writer and make my living at it would be my English teachers. Well, I won't bore you with my adolescence and my teen years of wildness, but I ended up going through the police academy, decided I wanted to be a policeman, and that was my first introduction to really writing. My first writing was learning how to write police reports, the who, what, when, where, and why, and how, and all that. And that gave me the basic structure. Now, I always enjoyed reading. That's the thing. And I'll tell you, that's one thing. If you want to be a writer, you better be a reader, because you will learn so much about writing simply by reading other writers. You'll see what works, what feels good, what doesn't feel right, whatever. The first time I ever got in trouble in school was because I was reading, and I was in third grade. I still remember this. And I was in third grade, and the teacher was boring me so much. I remember sitting in that third grade classroom. That probably wasn't the same day, but I have two memories from that class. One, looking out the window and counting up, and I says, man, I've got 9 more years of this junk. 9 more years till I can get out of school, right? And it just, oh man, just depressed me. I didn't know how I was going to survive 9 more years of school. I hated school. But the other thing was when I got in trouble, and I wasn't a troublesome kid at that time, not yet. And I was so bored with what the teacher was droning on about. I carried around a book with me, a hardback book from our home, and the title was "Little People Who Became Great," and it was a story, written in a level that a third grader or fourth or fifth could understand. It was a story about the great, people in history, Thomas Edison and all that kind of person. And the teacher saw that I wasn't paying attention to her. She didn't like that. So all of a sudden I felt the looming presence of her above me, and I looked up and she looked down and took my book. So anyway, I got out of police work after a while. I ran a few businesses, quite a few different things, did a lot of stuff, a lot of interesting stuff. And then about 2016, the preparedness movement was really growing. Now, I should put in here, I did publish a martial arts magazine. I always enjoyed writing. And that was successful. That was distributed worldwide. It wasn't one of the slick ones that you've probably never heard of it. It was called Grandmaster, and it was distributed mainly to the serious martial arts people. But I enjoyed the writing of it. And, the more you do something, the better you get. Well, here in about 2015, 2016, the preparedness movement was really getting charged up. I had to do with a couple of things, that zombie show and what else? There was the Doomsday Prepper show that was on that people got all tightened up about, and so I got involved. I was working at a hospital at the time in security, and the guys, many of the guys who worked there, were becoming interested in preparedness. Well, I had a long history in preparedness, and so I would talk with them about it, and I saw that there was so much kind of wrong information out there in the world about preparedness that that I thought, well, people kept asking me questions. And I thought, I'm going to write a little short story, and about what to do if the big one hit, right? An EMP wipes out the grid, wipes out all the electricity and electronics in the world. And that's what was thought about at the time. And I said, well, I'm going to write a little short story about what you should do immediately after if that happens, because that was the big concern. What should I do? How should I prepare? So I thought, okay, I'll write a little short story. and then, I'll make copies of it, and I'll just hand it out to these people. Maybe they'll enjoy it. Well, I started pecking out a little, short story on my phone, because I don't know how to type. But I started typing it out in my notes program on my phone. and then I would have to, email that to myself and blah blah blah. Well, I kept going. I got into the story, and I thought, okay, let me put a scenario of, you know, it happening, and let me follow a person and a family through this situation, and in that story, show what they should be doing. Well, I started writing, and the more I wrote, the more interested I became in it. And it turned out, I said, well, it's kind of interesting. People might actually like this, but my real concern was to teach, to instruct. Here's what you should do in this situation. Well, I kept typing, my notes program would only take so much, and then I'd email that to myself, and then I'd lay that into uh, a Word program, and then format it and everything. And so it was very tedious, but it's not like I typed that fast anyway. So I kept going, and the story kept developing, because what happens here is when you're telling a story, the question that always lies ahead is, then what? Okay, then what? That's what really makes a story the story. And then what happens? Because that's what people want to know. And then what happens? Now I'll say a word in a minute about the structure of your story and conversation and things like that. And I tell you, I really enjoy writing conversation now. I didn't at the time when I first started. But so much of life is conversation. You get to know characters through their conversation. You reveal so much of the story and the plot and the background through conversation. And it's a lot better to do it like that, in my opinion, than simply to write it out, because in the past Joe had dealt with blah blah blah. It's a lot more interesting to kind of reveal that through conversation with someone else. Well, the more I wrote, excuse me, let me get a drink of my. This is one of the things that makes a writer's life great. I can sit around and drink coffee whenever I want, all day long if I want to, while I write and think and do interesting things. Well, it kept going, it kept going, kept going. The story kept going, and I became interesting. The funny thing is, I used to hear writers say things like, well, sometimes the character surprises me by what they did. And I thought, what do you mean they surprise you? I mean, you're the one creating it. You're the one in charge of what they're doing. How could they possibly surprise you? They can. They can, because as you write a story, the story becomes kind of almost a living thing of itself. And you're answering, like I said, you're answering this continuous question of what next, then what? Okay. And then you say, and the more experience you have, and I was fortunate that I had a career in law enforcement, and then I'd owned some businesses, and I've always been very socially involved. And so I have a lot of experience with people. And the more experience with people you have, the better writer you're going to be. I kept following that. I kept just simply, the book was, because I've had people ask me, how do you write that? I just kept answering that continuing question of, then what? Okay. Well, finally, I had so much there. I says, I wonder, and it never occurred to me. I never intended to write a book. I wonder if this could be a book. And so I saw on my words program that it showed me how many words were in it. You see, I didn't even know how to use Word. I didn't. And it said I had 90 some thousand words in this book. The first one was the reversion. And get it back here for you. This was the first one. It says, when the world collapsed, some were ready to start over. And I said, well, 90,000 words, it seems, I don't know if that's a lot or not, because I'm used to writing or reading big, thick novels back when I had time to read. And I wonder if that's enough to make a book. So I thought, well, okay, let me Google, the greatest friend of the writer, right? How many words does the great American novel, Huckleberry Finn, how many words does it have? So I Googled it, and it told me that it had like 65,000 words or something like that. Don't quote me. It's got 60-some thousand words. And I said, wow, I got 50% more words than Huckleberry Finn, right? It must be a book. So then I figured, okay, well, how do I do this? Well, I discovered that Amazon has a program, which at the time was called Create. I don't remember. They've changed it now to KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. It's a direct publisher. And I found out you can upload your manuscript to them, and you design. And I design all my own covers. Uh, Maybe I'll get back to that in a second. Uh, but I didn't know what to do with the cover. And I asked people, and I heard a lot of people say, oh, you got to hire a graphic designer, and that costs thousands. And I said, well, I don't expect to sell any books, so I'm not going to spend thousands on somebody designing my cover. And, I kind of messed around with that for a while and finally just said, well, I'm just going to do it myself. And I found out that my computer had a program on it called, what was it? I don't know. It's one of the Windows programs. And so I designed the cover. And I knew kind of what I wanted it to look like, and it's worked out very well. And so I uploaded the manuscript to CreateSpace. That's what it was called back before they switched it over to KDP. And so I uploaded the manuscript, and then I uploaded the file for the cover and had to make some changes because just formatting and things like that. And then it was ready, and I couldn't believe, oh my God, I don't think I told anybody that I was doing this. Even my wife. I'm not sure. I might have, but I don't recall. And so I said, wow, there it is. So I ordered, I think, 5 copies. I didn't expect to sell any, but I ordered 5 copies, maybe 6. Anyway, I ordered one for, my mom, my wife, and then one each for our kids, because I figured my mom and my wife have to tell me that they like it, right? And so, and then I guess probably I ordered one just for me. I don't know. And then one for each of the kids so that, when they got older, they could say, hey, look, Dad wrote a book. And then I forgot about it. I ordered them. They got in. I gave one to my wife and my mom, and as they were supposed to do, they told me how much they liked it, right? Kids didn't care. And I read a little bit through it, saw some typos that I'd missed, and that embarrassed me, and well, anyway, because I didn't pay a proofreader, editor, or anything like that. I just wrote it and did it myself. Well, a couple weeks went by, and I said, I wonder if anybody, because then they list it on Amazon and make it available for sale. And I said, I wonder if anybody's bought one. And I was almost scared to check because I just didn't. Well, I was feeling pretty good. I'd written a book. I almost wanted to stay within that limited success than put it out there and see and be dashed, my dreams just dashed by the world that nobody bought my book. And it took me a while to learn because I'm technologically illiterate. It took me a while to find the page that told me whether anybody had bought my book. And when it came up, I thought that there had been a mistake. And I thought, this can't be right because a whole lot of people were buying my book all over the world. This can't be right. This can't be right. And so I kept checking back every day. More people were buying it. More people were buying it. More people buying it. And then at the end of the month, it said, this is how much money you've earned. And I said, that can't be right. That's more than I make in my job. And so I don't think I even said anything to I didn't tell my wife anything because I really didn't believe it. I kept expecting to get a note from them, an email from them saying, Mr. Smith, we're so sorry, but we got you mixed up with somebody else, and all these sales were really for their book, not yours. I really did. I expected, every day I expected to get that email. And that email never came. Well, they pay you 2 months behind. Okay, so like if your book comes out in January, you're going to get paid at the end of March. Well, I kept holding my breath, and I says, can't be. And then the next month came around. I still wasn't getting paid yet, right? But the next thing, it was kept selling. And the money that they were telling me that I made was now twice as much as I made at my job. But I still didn't believe it. So I'm not doing anything until I see money in my account. And I know that's not going to happen. Well, then when the day came, darned if the money wasn't in my account. It was like magic. Like magic. I says, how is this? I just took something that didn't exist, a story in my mind, uh, tapped it out on my phone, emailed it to myself, did everything myself, and just put it out there. And didn't spend any money because Amazon was doing it all. People would go through Amazon, order it. I didn't have to touch a book. I didn't have to touch anything. They printed it. They sent it to the person. They sent me my money. And still, I didn't quite believe it because the next month's income was a lot more. When that one hit, I showed Kelly, and I still couldn't believe it. And I said, I'm not even sure what to think about this. I said, this is a life-changing situation. And it was. Let me put on my peepers here and see how much time I've got left on this, because I'm getting more into this story than I realize. But I want you all to know, and I want you all to feel more certain that you can do it too. Okay, so I'll continue on this. Well, and then I saw that how to find out what reviews people were leaving on it. And I was almost scared, to check that, but I did. And man, I mean, 5-star, 5-star, 5-star. I had some 4 stars. I had a couple of 1 stars from people who obviously, maybe they knew me and they hated me. I don't know. But they were so hateful that Amazon took those off because it was obviously not a legitimate review. But for the most part, it was all 5 stars and some 4 stars thrown in, a couple 3 stars. But I just couldn't believe it. And people were saying, we love this book. We use this book. We read it to our family. We use it as a learning experience. We read it as a family. I bought other copies for my family. I was going, wow, man. I mean, it took me a long time to believe it. My wife will tell you that it wasn't until I put out probably 3 books that I considered myself a writer. So when people ask, well, what do you do for a living? I'm a writer. Before that, I wouldn't say it because I really didn't believe it. So one of the comments said that they couldn't wait to see what happens next. Remember what I said? A story is a continuing question of now what, right? And I thought, next. What do you mean next? I never considered a next. A next would mean another book. I just wrote a whole book. I don't think I can write another one. I mean, I don't know. I think the first one was a fluke. But I said, well, all right, let me see if I can do it again. So I started writing the next one, which was let's see. I get them mixed up the revival. Okay. And I started writing, and that one took me about a year because I was still working full time, and I would just do this on my phone whenever I had spare time. I wrote all of my books in my spare time, just sitting down 10 minutes at a time, half an hour at a time, not like I do now, which I can devote however much time I want with, for the most part. And so it took me about a year, and I thought, okay. I was almost scared to submit that for fear that it would be such a failure compared to the first one that, I just go, And I put it out there, and darned if that didn't start selling. And then it just went on. And then there was a 3rd book and a 4th book and a 5th book and a 6th book and a 7th book, and now I'm on the 8th book, plus I'm doing a couple of others. Now, all of this is to give you, this was all leading up to giving you more confidence in the fact that you can do it. And I'll tell you right now, if you're a living, breathing human, you have a book in you. I have known so many people who have had fascinating lives that other people would love to read about. But see, to them, their lives aren't fascinating. But they are to other people, because people are natural voyeurs. They want to look into worlds that are different from their own. Okay? And that's what a writer can provide. A writer creates. Here I'm talking about fiction, and I've also written some nonfiction stuff. But in fiction, you're able to tell stories, to teach lessons, to teach about life, to give people something to consider, to give people something. Look at the greatest, what I consider to be the greatest novel was Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand. Uh, the book that millions have started and hundreds have finished. But there was it was such a treatise on a certain outlook on life. There would be times with that book, it took me a year to read it because I would go to bed, and usually at that time, this is many, many years ago, I'd go to bed and say, oh, I'm going to read for an hour. And I'd sit down and I'd read a paragraph and have to put it down because there had been so much in that paragraph that I wanted to consider and think about and just absorb. A book can have such an impact on other people. And I'm very happy. I've been gratified, and I give all the glory to God on this because God is the one, as far as I'm concerned, He directed me on this. I don't think I was good enough to write these books, but apparently He wanted me to write these, and so many people have told me how much it has meant to their lives, how much they've learned, how it completely changed the way that they either prepared or lived their life or whatever. And, I feel almost embarrassed when they say that because I don't think I deserve all those accolades. But you really do. You can have an effect on people. You can help people. You can teach people things. You can help them. Whether you're teaching them, you're helping them learn, or you're simply giving them enjoyment. In which case, you're adding to their life, right? In both those ways. Sorry, I have a little cold. So anyway, you have a story. Think about what your story is. One of the main things that people will tell you is write about what you know. And I will say that is so true. You can tell when people are not writing about what they know. Or no, that's the wrong way to put it. When they're writing about things they don't know. You can tell. Now, all the things that I write is because it's the product of my experience. There's a lot of things that I couldn't write. Right? I couldn't write what it would be like to grow up in a girls' school. so stay within your lane. Staying within your lane is I'd say number one. What do you know about? And a lot of people out there will say, well, I don't really know about anything. I've just been I've worked at this job for a long time, or I've been a wife and a mother and things like that. You don't have any idea how fascinating some of the stories you have to tell could be for other people. So let me take that as an example. Say you're a person. Say you're a woman, and you have been you might have had your own career, maybe not. Doesn't matter. You've had but I say maybe you haven't. Let's say it. Let's do it that way. You've been a wife and a mother. You have raised those kids. You have been a part of a dynamic family situation. You have learned so much. Do you realize just writing about the things in your life, the challenges, the funny stuff, because we all have funny stuff in our lives, right? Do you realize how many other people would love to read that book? How many other women who have been mothers and wives and or started their own businesses? My wife Kelly. She started a lot of her own business. She's had a fascinating life that if she really wrote about it, and so many funny things, she's known a lot of funny people, and people would love to read it. Now, she doesn't think so, but it's true. And if you just wrote about that, you would have millions of other women who either shared your experience and would enjoy reading it. Because, see, then they feel like they're with somebody else like themselves. That's what it's all about. Or maybe people who had a different life experience than you and wanted a peek into your kind of lifestyle. Or you're a guy who says, well, I'm just a guy that I've been a father and a husband, and I've worked this job for 30 years. I bet you've had a lot of interesting things happen in those 30 years. You've had, like I said before, you've had challenges, you've had situations you had to overcome, you've had funny stuff. and just writing about almost, everybody has a life experience. And people enjoy hearing other people's life experience. I used to tell people that I worked with, some emergency room nurses. I said, I was talking to the chief nursing officer at a major hospital. I said, you ought to write a book. I mean, the things that happen in a hospital, whether it's in the ER or whether it's in the intensive care or whether it's just someplace else, there's stuff that happens in a hospital that is just soul crushing, that is sad, and so much that's funny. And I told every one of them, you could make a bestseller. Have you? Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think I could do that. But they could. They have a story in them. How to be a writer. Identify what you're. First off, if you don't want to be a writer, don't. You don't have to. It's not for everybody. It's a very unusual life. Now, I'll tell you, in my opinion, it's the best life you could have, and I'll do a separate one on that. But it's not for everybody. Many people need a more structured life than a writer. But watch the next one that I do, whenever I do it. I don't know. I'll do it in the next maybe couple of weeks. Watch that one. I'm going to talk about the life of a writer. What is the life of a writer like? But first off, decide if you want to be a writer. And then identify what is the story you want to tell. Is it your story? Is the story about something that you're interested in? Well, make sure you know about it. Now, there's a lot that you can look up, and one of the cool things about being a writer is that you'll get into areas that you'll say, okay, I think I know that, but let me learn more about that in order to be able to fully explain it to the reader. You learn so much when you're writing professionally. And so once you've determined that you want to be a writer and decide what your story is, the story that you want to share, like I say, whether it's your story or just a story you want to put out there. Maybe you want to create a whole new world like Tolkien and what's the woman's name who wrote Harry Potter? I don't even know. I'm not into fantasy, but they've sold more books than I have, right? And then get at it. Start it. I tell people and other things, there's only two parts to a job. The first is getting started, and the second is keep going until you're done. And they'll tell you that the most frightening thing to a writer is an empty page. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Some of the writing that you do is in your head while you're going through your life, and all of a sudden a sentence occurs to you. That's a perfect opening sentence for the next chapter or for the book. A lot of times I know the ending line